For the early American Republic artifact project, I decided to do mine on a set of dueling pistols owned by John Randolph of Roanoke. They tell an interesting story on politics during the early American Republic and on the institution of dueling in the 19th century and what that means in a larger sense. And so first, these two sets of pistols is what I'm doing it on. They're in the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, and they were used in a duel between John Randolph and Henry Clay over some political disagreements. And so what I want to do here is I want to talk about the two individuals that participated in this duel, the duel itself, and some wider ideas on dueling in the 19th century and how to do duels and that sort of thing, what that means in a larger political sense. And so first, for our first of our characters, we have John Randolph, a staunch Democratic Republican, served as a member of the House of Representatives and a member of the U.S. Senate, and then eventually the 8th U.S. Minister to Russia, later serving on his career. Famed as an orator, a great speaker, outspoken individual, and was described as rather eccentric for his time. And he is going to be up against another character that is pretty familiar to a lot of people, Henry Clay, the great negotiator of the lost founding father who never got to be president. He served as first a U.S. Senator from Kentucky, then 9th Secretary of State, then eventually the 7th Speaker of the House. He greatly supported John Quincy Adams as he eventually became his Secretary of State and served a long career negotiating treaties like the Treaty of Ghent and a series of other very, very important treaties to American history. And so to the actual event of the day is in May 1826, where John Randolph is giving a fiery speech about the corrupt bargain that was made to make John Quincy Adams president, specifically targeting Henry Clay on some of the dubious things that were done within the Senate chamber. To this end, he calls him cowardice and a few other insulting incidences, and eventually, after the speech, Henry Clay goes to him and challenges him to a duel that he views that he has slighted him upon his honor. Now, things like this happened every now and then. 1826, this is well within the heyday of a lot of dueling during the time period. This time at Washington, D.C., it's a little more serious, but after this initial incident, John Randolph agrees to the duel, as that's the custom of the time, and they both don't talk to each other ever since and acquire things called seconds. These are intermediaries between the two individuals that work out a time, a place where this duel is going to occur. And for this duel in question, it's going to be set on Saturday, the 8th of April, 1826, on the Virginia side of the Potomac River at sundown, which admittedly sounds very sounds like a perfect place for a duel. And so used in this duel is the artifacts that I'm talking about in this doing for this project, particularly the sets of pistols. What makes these pistols very interesting is if you notice the barrels have kind of sides to them. They're not what's referred to as smooth bore, as they're not just metal tubes, they have rifling inside of them. It means that these were very accurate firearms, meaning that if you wanted to shoot somebody from, let's say, 10 paces, it would work very well at that. Even they were also inspected to have hair triggers, so even the firing in them make them even easier. And so, as we move towards the second pistol here used in the duel, we'll talk about what exactly happened on the day. And so, in attendance of this duel were 2 seconds, a surgeon for each participant, and 1 U.S. Senator. The weapons were these exact weapons pictured here, and the distance they decided was 10 paces. What they would decide was that one person would give the word, count to 3, and then eventually the duel would begin. As there was one interesting thing that happened before. John Randolph had written to Henry Clay, as this picture is not exactly indicative of what happened, had written to Henry Clay saying that he did not intend to shoot him, as he viewed the whole situation to be ridiculous and disagreed to participate. So as the two men lined up, John Randolph's pistol actually accidentally fired, creating an already tense situation even worse. But once they had readied themselves, they lined up 10 paces. They both turned, fired at each other. John Randolph firing wildly, and Henry Clay grazing John Randolph's overcoat. It almost seemed like he was trying to kill him. And so after this initial fire, John Randolph, after they reload, they get ready to fire again. He fires in the air, and Henry Clay kind of sees the situation that to shoot a man who had fired in the air is even more dishonorable. And so Clay approaches him and says, "I trust in God, my dear sir, you are untouched after what has occurred. I would not be harmed for you 1,000 words." Randolph simply replies, "You owe me a coat." And so the two men parted on agreeable terms, and the following Monday exchanged cards, and courteous relations between them had been restored. And so, with that, two prominent figures in American politics nearly killed each other. But what this story tells us is a little bit about what politics were like during that time period. It is an interesting, genteel idea of dueling each other and then saying good graces to each other the next day. And so what's pictured here is the Code Duello, which in 1776, which is the basis for the American dueling tradition. And so to walk you through what exactly this means, first, there is some sort of slight against one party. This is where one person insults them in some way they view dishonorable. Once this is done, they agree on what they're going to fight with. The person who is being challenged makes that decision. It can technically be anything, as duels have been fought with rifles and billiard balls, two Frenchmen once fought with. Once that's agreed upon, usually it's pistols in almost all cases. Then their seconds, which are these impartial individuals, then act as intermediaries on setting up time, place, and what the end of the duel is. It might be first blood, whoever is shot first. It might be to satisfaction or to the death. There's one such case where a man agreed to duel till satisfaction and was precedingly shot 3 times. And so there are these interesting cases involved dueling where two politicians would go out and fight each other, and in some cases they intended to kill one another. The most famous one that's known in America is, as many people have heard of, the Burr-Hamilton duel. This is where Burr met with Hamilton after a slight upon his honor after losing the election and shot and killed him. And so it's this idea in American politics that, especially during this early American Republican period, that these guys hated each other, that they were willing to go out in some field in New Jersey or across the Potomac River and fight each other and kill each other over matters of honor. There's the famous duel of Burr-Hamilton. There's one time where where Hamilton challenged James Monroe to a duel. Another famous duel between Andrew Jackson and one Dixon. Famous marksman where he shot him in the head. And so we're talking about a brutal time in American politics where the slightest slight, as it were, could result in one of the parties being killed in a duel. And so the items that are being talked about and being examined during this project is a witness to this history and a witness to this idea of a brutish past. As duels did not really go away until after the Civil War. Well into the antebellum period, men in the South were still dueling each other, fighting over matters of honor and things related to the sword. And many different prominent figures throughout America owned a set of dueling pistols, or a set of pistols as a sign of status and honor, and this is no different. John Randolph's pistols is a representation of what it was like in that time period to be a politician, that he just had these lying around ready for this sort of situation. And so this tells the story that during the American Republic, during the early days, it was rough. I'd like to bring up the point that when it comes to talking about brutish politics, nowadays really has nothing upon the past. As in, we don't have people going around shooting each other anymore, or killing each other in duels that would become infamous in history, or even be made into musicals. And so, what I'm getting at on this is this idea, that through through these two pistols, we can understand what America was like back in the 19th century, and what politicians did on a daily basis, or what they worried about, things like duels. And so, with this presentation, I hope you understand on how duels might be conducted and how they affect larger American politics, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.